We are once again talking about the Acolyte, and this was a show that I thought was all said and done with, but it looks like there's some new developments concerning it, which is kind of surprising because Disney decided to cancel this show just a couple weeks after the last episode. Now, ordinarily, they don't like to announce that they're canceling something or not renewing it because that's them admitting failure, but it was pretty obvious for anyone paying attention to that this show was just a massive failure for them. Not only was the viewership numbers really low, but we can see on Rotten Tomatoes, the audience score was the lowest of any Disney plus Star Wars show at all. And it didn't help with the fact that this was one of the most expensive Disney plus Star Wars show also. Now, there are other shows that are said to have been more expensive, like Andor, for instance, and that got renewed for a second season. But that's because the viewership for that was actually decent. Even though it started off pretty low, it did pick up some viewership, and it has since kind of built up a bit of a following. That's why they're deciding to give that one another chance. But it seems like Disney was looking at the Acolyte and we're thinking, yeah, there's no way this will ever be a success, even if we renewed it for another season. Now, a lot of the people who actually like this show aren't taking that lightly because they pretty much built their identity around it. I mean, that was the whole point of this show to them and the creators of it, was that this was an identity politics show. So a rejection of this is basically a rejection of their whole ideology, and they couldn't stand for that. And that's why we saw things like this change.org petition going around to try to renew the Acolyte. So far, I mean, it's got nearly 82,000 signatures. So I guess that's a pretty good for them, but still only around 82,000 people were willing to sign this petition, just take a minute out of their day to sign the petition to renew the show. And this petition was launched August 20th. So it's been over a month and they've only gotten this many people to sign it, which just goes to show how low the viewership is for the Acolyte. And I've talked about this petition in the past and kind of laughed about it, but now we get a little bit more because clearly there's not enough people to demand the Acolyte for Disney to actually decide to renew it. So some people are taking it a step further, and now we got this GoFundMe out right now to try to fund the second season of the Acolyte. So far, I think this is just from the person who created this, $10 raised out of a $180 million goal. Now, never mind the fact that this would be a significantly reduced budget from the first season if they actually did fund it for $180 million, and assuming that GoFundMe doesn't take their cut, which they do. I just can't help but laugh at this because this is a sheer act of desperation. And when talking about this in the past, I say that a lot of the fans of this are kind of going through the various stages of grief. First, there's denial, then there's anger, then there's bargaining. And I think that's kind of where they're at right now before they eventually get to depression and acceptance. But let's look at this GoFundMe thing they have for it. 72,800 people signed a petition on change.org to renew it. Well, it's higher than that now. If each person donated $2,292, we could have a season 2. Okay. So are all the people who are going to be taking 1 minute out of their day to sign a petition going to be the same people who actually spend money on it? Because one thing that comes with the Acolyte is a lot of people weren't buying the merch for it. So I don't know if they'd actually be willing to spend nearly $2,300 to renew it for a second season. But let's continue. The Acolyte opened the door for so many Star Wars fans, new and old, to feel seen. Not that it was a good show or anything like that. It's just this show made them feel seen. And you kind of see what I'm talking about when I say they built their ideology around this, and a rejection of this show is basically a rejection of their non-theistic religion. To feel welcome and accepted by an IP and fandom that hadn't previously been so for anyone who didn't check off certain boxes. So they're basically admitting here that this show was designed to check various diversity boxes. And it's also kind of emphasizes the point that this wasn't made for Star Wars fans, because they're saying we haven't been accepted in Star Wars, therefore we weren't fans of Star Wars. Since this is kind of pushing our ideology, well, now we can enjoy this. So this is the first time we can actually enjoy Star Wars. So basically, Disney paid billions of dollars for an IP, and the first thing they do is try to get rid of the fan base of that IP in order to try to attract a new one. Not a smart move, in my opinion, but I'm also not the one running Disney either. Not only that, but the Acolyte became a beacon for representation that many fans have felt was lacking in the Star Wars universe for decades. It wasn't. There was lots of representation even since the very first very first movie, even in the original trilogy, there was strong female characters. There was non-white characters in that. So I really don't know what they're talking about. The only difference is they didn't virtue signal on it back then. With both creators and actors that truly understood the world of Star Wars, well, clearly they didn't understand the world of Star Wars, because you even say right here, you're trying to attract people who weren't fans of Star Wars in order to represent those various check boxes, as you put it. The Acolyte quickly became a fan favorite because of their clear passion and love shown in the work. This show, at the time, people believed it cost $180 million. Now we know it was probably around $230 million, if not more, for this. And it didn't show that on screen. And to me, that's not showing passion for your work and care to do a good job. It just goes to show people who are incompetent, given to reins of something that they really have no business managing, and the drive to give us something new and fresh to fall in love with. Now, I will admit, this was something new and something we haven't seen with Star Wars before. New doesn't necessarily mean good, but it's still new nonetheless. So I will give credit where credit's due on that end. New characters with new stories that still existed within the same galaxies we cherished. I guess. I mean, this is way in the past, so not really connected with anything that we know, but sure, I will say it is new. But again, new doesn't necessarily mean better. Regardless of the orchestrated review bombing by a small faction of loud trolls, this is the stupidest thing, and this shows the delusion of the fans of this show. They think Disney is looking at the Acolyte and looking at the viewership and are like, man, this show's doing great. We're making so much money off of it. But, there's some people online who don't like it and they're giving it bad reviews. So let's cancel the show. No, that's not what's happening. Maybe you can make the argument that this show would have been a lot better received if the word of mouth was more positive for it. But we can never know if that's the case. But again, I really don't think that's going to happen, because there was a lot of people who tuned in for the first few episodes of this, and then you saw the viewership just drop off pretty dramatically. That just goes to show there was a lot of people who were trying to give this a chance, even with the bad word of mouth, and they still rejected it because people reject your ideology. That's why they didn't want to see that infested in Star Wars. They just wanted to see a good Star Wars show, and your ideology cannot produce it. But I'm going to continue with this because it's almost done. It trended repeatedly throughout and after the show aired, trending because people were just trashing on it the whole time, but sure, it was trending. It has a very dedicated fan base. I would say a mentally ill fan base, but I'm not a doctor, so I can't say that definitively, but that's just the impression I'm getting, especially since many of them don't even know what gender they really are. Willing to fight for its continuation. It's a story that deserves to be told, and you're more than welcome to tell it somewhere else, or more than welcome to create your own stories. But what they try to do is hijack something else with an existing IP, because they're not creative enough to actually create their own stories or to tell a story and create a new IP that people would actually be interested in. The only way they can actually get any attention whatsoever is to try to hijack something else that someone else created, and something that actually has an existing fan base. And whenever they're doing that, they just cause it to crumble, and then they try to move on. They're basically like a cancer or a virus. They just try to co-opt something else, destroy it by trying to push their agenda, and then they move on to the next thing. But people are starting to understand that's what's going on now and starting to openly reject it. And we're starting to see a shift in culture war in recent years. The pendulum is swinging back, where a lot of studios, game developers are understanding, like, if we cater to these crazy people, they're not going to actually show up, or they're not going to show up in significant numbers for us to be profitable. But what we have seen is when movies and video games in the last couple of years have done away from that, or at least not trying to pander to these they thems, well, then suddenly it's very profitable. Disney saw that with Inside Out 2. There was word that they were deliberately trying not to make it gay, and come to find out, that was the highest grossing animated film of all time. Deadpool and Wolverine starred two straight white males, and that movie was $1 billion hit at a time when the MCU was putting out just nothing but flops. So I think people are starting to figure out, the people who are actually signing this or trying to fund this, or at least the one person here, or the ones signing the petition aren't the ones that you actually need to care about. You need to care about the actual fans, you know, the ones that Disney paid billions of dollars to acquire the IP that they're fans of. That's who they should be listening to. But I honestly think this is just kind of a bad joke or some delusion by a person who's even more crazy than those who created and signed the change.org petition. But I am going to look at this and check on it in the next coming days to see if it actually gains any more money. But I really doubt that something's going to happen, because it says 1 month ago, $10. So I just learned about this. So if this was started some time ago and nothing actually came of it, I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case. But I still think this is just kind of funny and just goes to show how delusional some of these Acolyte fans really are. But let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there, because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.